When I was 5, my parents separated. My mom initially left me with my biological father, but it took off because he had to find himself post separation. And when she visited about a month after she'd left, it was to learn that I'd been shuffled from relative to relative, to the point that when she showed up, it was to find me living with a neighbor that I was in no way related to, because I repeat, they kept shuffling me like it was Friday night and the playlist was "Who's Got Custody of Noria Tonight?" Anyway, mom takes me away. She remarries 3 years later. My stepfather helped raise me, and he really was the best father a girl could hope for. But he passed on just after I turned 22. And guess who came crawling back a year afterwards, wanting to get back with my mother and hoping that I would play matchmaker? I guess my biological father watched The Parent Trap, huh? Because, yes, I would like to talk about the propaganda that the Parent Trap pushed, which thankfully I didn't fall for in my early 20s, i.e., that the happy ending for a kid with divorced parents is for said parents to come back together. Miss me with that bullshit. Now, I would like to start by apologizing for the trauma dump I just put on you all in the start of this video. I felt it was necessary because it is tied to the topic at hand. Because you see, as a child, I loved The Parent Trap. It was one of my top favorite movies growing up. Not my absolute favorite, of course. I already mentioned it in a previous video that honor goes to Father of the Bride. Which, side note, did you know that Nancy Meyers, who wrote and directed The Parent Trap, first co-wrote Father of the Bride Parts 1 and 2? She also wrote and directed Something's Gotta Give, What Women Want, and The Holiday. Incredible, isn't it? In Nancy, I most certainly trust for giving me the movies that are just heartwarming to me, movies I keep coming back to over and over again. But it is in my coming back to them, specifically The Parent Trap, that I realized that there are certain flags I'd missed when I watched the film as a child, and only started to realize it when I was much older, and it finally got cemented for me when I did a rewatch of it recently. Because sure, The Parent Trap is wholesome. Annie and Ali are adorable, albeit little terrors that if I were Meredith, I would absolutely run for the hills to get as far away from them as possible. Which is a good time for me to just say, Meredith was right. Justice for Meredith Blake. But as I was saying, sure, the kids are adorable and the film is awesome, but something that I find insidious about The Parent Trap is the fact that we often gloss over the very real issue with the film. It is a movie about twin girls separated at birth by their very selfish parents. Like, let's be real. Nick and Liz deciding that they were going to pull some "you take one twin and I'll take the other and we'll never talk about the other twin," so that the child were raising things that she's the only one up until she goes to a camp and is fencing with someone who's equally as talented as her. And when the mask come off, she learns that there's someone else in the world with her exact same face. And after terrorizing the other girl for a while at camp to the point that she's put on timeout by the camp counselors, with the girl wherein they both discover that they share the exact same birthday and each have half a picture of their missing parent who turns out to be the other girl's actual parents, i.e., that they are twin sisters, is ass in my book. Sorry, I didn't really take a long breath for that. It's ass and it's selfish and it speaks to just how big the irreconcilable differences that pulled Liz and Nick together were. Because it says a lot about the absolute sad and vile state of their marriage, that not only would they go full no contact, but they would also go no contact with their other kid as well. Also, that they don't need to ever interact with each other again. And sure, the film likes to brush it off as Liz was waiting and hoping that Nick would call out to her when they separated, and Nick thought that their marriage was truly over and Liz wouldn't want to hear from him again. But that instead tells me as an adult that their communication skills is abysmal. That these two people who were carried away by the whirlwind that was meeting each other and falling in love did not take the time to actually grow and know each other well enough to be able to tell what it is that their partner could potentially want, or speak to them in a way that they could find out what they wanted. And all of this is even post the fight. Because every time I've rewatched The Parent Trap since, I keep asking myself, what exactly were Nick and Liz fighting about? We don't know. The film never tells us. Hell, they don't know. So please tell me, how exactly is it that these two people who cannot recollect exactly what set off the last big fight that led to them walking away from each other, each with a twin in tow, who during their fight couldn't even communicate effectively with each other about what they want from the other person? How exactly are they meant to make their marriage work the second time around? Because you see, the funny thing about movies is that they come to an end. After we get our happily ever after ending, wrapping up of the story, it pauses in that exact moment forever, memorializing our thoughts and psyche until, if you're like me, you randomly have the thought of, Nick and Liz probably got a second divorce the minute Ali and Annie got into college, because there is absolutely no way their relationship is sustainable. The cracks are never actually visibly addressed or healed in the mess that is their marriage. Instead, what the film attempts to do is gloss over it so that we can instead focus on the wish fulfillment fantasy that is present in the parent trap. The one wish that, according to the Cooperative Parenting Institute, a ton of kids of divorced parents have: to have their parents get back together. In a write-up for the Institute by Anne-Marie Termini, where she talks about child therapists who helping children of divorced parents process their trauma, she mentions that these therapists often ask these kids what 3 wishes they would make their family better. And more often than not, one of those wishes is often, I wish my parents would get back together again. She goes on to say, most children, no matter their age, hope so badly for their parents to reunite. The desire is strongest when parents first decide to separate. This wish may not end when one of the parents remarry, and although it isn't rational, children will still hold on to the hope of the possibility of their parents getting back together. She goes on to explain that some children often employ various tactics to try and get said parents together again, and wouldn't you look at that? That is the exact plot of The Parent Trap. Now, I'm sure someone is probably thinking, girl, you just said that your father tried to get you to play matchmaker and you refused. Doesn't that negate what you just read as a child of divorced parents yourself? And my answer to that is no, because he tried it when I was 22. Shortly after my parents separated, however, back when I was 5, I begged and prayed and hoped that they would get back together. For like the first year after my mother remarried, whilst I was still getting used to the change and getting used to my stepfather, I was still making that same prayer. Hell, that was around the time The Parent Trap got released, and let me tell you, the way I wished I had a twin sister I could switch places with so we could figure out a way to get our parents together because of that film. Maturing, however, is realizing that my biological father and my mom were absolutely terrible together. She deserved way better, as did I. This thought, this belief that the child, as an outsider who clearly doesn't have all the facts or the life experiences to be able to realize the intricacies of their parents' marriage and relationship, this belief that this child can make the call of wanting to get their divorced parents together and actively carrying out actions to make it so, is a wish, it's a hope, it is pure propaganda. And that is what we were served with The Parent Trap. Neither Annie nor Ali were old enough to really understand why their parents' marriage didn't work the first time. The film let us ride that happiness and wave of reunited sisters who would like to be together, and because they had been traumatized by their separation and do not want it to repeat itself, therefore scheme and push to make it a reality that their parents reunite so that they can be together as a family again. And that has us brush away the very core conflict point that was what birthed the separation of the girls in the first place. The fact that their parents' marriage is very, very flawed. And of course, we never get any inkling, any passing mention or scene where Nick and Liz admit to the cracks that started to appear in their marriage and how they would work on fixing them by saying, I don't know, going to marriage counseling before they marry each other again. And I know there's nothing sweet or wholesome or romantic about that, which is probably why the film didn't put it in. But I also wonder if the reason why it isn't in the film is because what Annie and Ali want at that moment, i.e. for them to be together and thus for their parents to get together, is what is driving the film itself. The Parent Trap doesn't care that what is pushing is an agenda that shouldn't be allowed to stand. That what it is pushing is propaganda. Sure, children's needs should be met, and I do think that Liz and Nick should have found a way to have the girls raised together instead of forcing them apart and then traumatizing them when they meet again and realize so much of what it is that they had lost just because of their parents' selfish actions. But I also wonder if that wasn't done to once again push this propaganda that divorced couples should get back together for the sake of their children's wish fulfillment fantasies. I mean, I'm pretty sure if we delve into it, that there are a ton of people today who were from divorced households who saw the Parent Trap and hope that they too could pull an Annie and Ali and get their parents together. Because consider this. If the girls had been raised to be aware of each other, to frequently spend time in each other's company, one where they weren't raised thinking that they are all alone only to find out that there is someone else who totally gets it and looks exactly like them to boot, if the girls had been raised together this way, would they still have that irrational desire to have their parents reunited? I don't think so. At least not at that age. Because at that point they are almost teenagers. And at least not to the point that would have them be absolute menaces to Meredith. And this is a great place for me to point out that part of that wish of wanting to see your parents get back together post-divorce is having to see any other partner that they might have as an enemy that is threatening the sanctity of that vision and wish. The fact that the film really leans into this, making Meredith out to be this vapid, gold-digging temptress who drives Nick out of his mind with her sex appeal, which, side note, I really would never understand this insistence of the film calling out Meredith for being a gold digger. Like, Nick is right there, hooking up with a pretty girl who is much younger than his ex-wife and only 15 years older than his daughter, i.e., Meredith Blake was a teenager when Ali and Annie were born. Like, let that sink in. If Meredith is getting with him because of his money, is getting with her because of her youth, and the great sex he's having with her, like the Yorubas would say, two gay four, meaning they balance each other out. But sorry for the diversion. Back to what I was saying. Part of wishing your parents would get together post-divorce is the villainization of any other partner that could come between that dream. They are the enemy that must be eradicated, and the film goes all out in doing so with Meredith. I think it was at that part of my rewatch that I realized that, yup, this film is propaganda. It's pushing the traditional family values of father, mother, and child and trying to tell us that divorce is horrible as it would scar your kids, and anybody who tries to come in between that reunification process needs to immediately be eradicated so the sanctity of the family unit, the purity of it, can be maintained. And trust me, when that clicked for me, when I realized what the film was pushing and what it had been pushing for years, it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Like, I still love The Parent Trap, mind you. The nostalgia would always keep me coming back to it. Plus, it was an incredible, utterly incredible performance by Natasha Richardson. May her soul and spirit continue to rest in peace. But God, I don't think I can watch it quite the same way again. Especially as someone who, like I mentioned at the start of this video, had such a chaotic time after my parents separated, and who eventually started remembering just how messy they were together. Watching it back now, all I can think and focus on is the fact that this movie that was marketed to kids with Lindsay Lohan's smiling face was pushing something quite troubling to these kids, especially if they were kids from divorced homes. Instead of just pointing out that, hey, sometimes things don't work out between your parents, sometimes they each have to go their own separate ways, but it doesn't mean that they don't love you and that they wouldn't care for you like they've always done. And who knows, sometime in the future you just might get an extra parent, someone new who would love and care for and cherish you, and that would be amazing too. Like, why can't we have a film like that? Oh, wait a minute, we do. It's called Made in Manhattan, which also stars Natasha Richardson, who is as always a delight on screen. But yeah, that is a film about a single mother who finds love with a US senator, and Tyler Posey gets to call Finn's daddy, which is great in my book. Of course, these are just my thoughts. Would love to hear yours as always. Please drop them in the comments. Let me know. Did you watch The Parent Trap as a kid? Did you love it? Have you seen it again as an adult? Do you still love it? Do you still have those same thoughts and emotions towards it? Please let me know in the comments. Like this video if you watched this far and haven't done so yet. Share it if you want. Support me on Patreon if you can. And until Monday's video, do remember, obsessing over the things you love, perfectly valid coping mechanism.